but then we will be uploading this later. Yeah. And thank you to all the audiences who have joined in. And we would request all the listeners to always remain in mute, and we'll give you out the instructions after some time. Rupa, you can maybe start around 10:45 after some time.
Okay, I will do. Hello.
Yes, you're audible, Rupa.
Yes.
If you can switch on your camera.
My camera has some problem, so
Okay,
I
okay, no
will
problem.
go with audio on.
Okay.
Yeah. Shall we start? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, to this paper presentation panel 3B of International Virtual Conference of Identity, Myth, Memories, Communications, and Culture Narratives. I welcome everyone, and I also invite our chairperson, Dr. Machung Wangliu Kamai to this panel presentations, and I also welcome and invite the paper presenters. First is Boniface Garjung Lang Kamai, Garima Das, Sunita Das, Dr. Ruth Lalsiam San Wangpui, Mrs. Evangeline Lamare, Priyanka Bist, Wangpli Kohilho Sina. And now I would like to introduce our chairperson, Dr. Machung Wang Liu Kamai. Dr. Kamai has done her PhD in communications from University of Hyderabad and is currently member of Communication, Culture and Diversity Research Group, John Coping University, Sweden. She has been certified as experts of new learning technology by University of Applied Science, Volkswagen, Germany. She was one of the 52 global mentors selected by Teachers College, Columbia University, New York for Teachers project. Mentors were selected based on their experience in teaching, working in developing world context, and knowledge of discussion in emergency field. She is teaching films, televisions, and new media productions in SVKM's Usha Praveens Gandhi College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Mumbai. As a member of educational experts in Global Campus 21, Global Knowledge Sharing and Learning, and as an online tutor in e-learning development and implementations course, and e-skills under GIZ, German International Corporation, and University of the Philippine Open University, University of the People, Pasadena, California. She is engaged with learners from diverse backgrounds. So this is a very brief profile of Dr. Kamai. Now I would like to request our chairperson to take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Rupa, for that generous introduction. And may I request all the panelists to kindly switch on the cameras while I read out the instructions, which you must be aware of, but the standard procedure, I will just read out all the instructions. Yeah. So, as you all know, you will be given 5 minutes each to give us a brief about your paper that you have presented already. And this would basically summarize your concepts so that people who are present today will get a gist of what your paper holds. And kindly adhere to the format of the entire panel being based only on discussion. And for the audiences, yeah, I would request people to kindly mute your microphone when you're not speaking to avoid the noise interference. Okay, and for the audiences, if you have any question, do type it in the chat box. We will not be using microphones because it might create interference and noise. So do type in your questions or any comment in the chat box that is available. And of course, all the panelists are requested to kindly adhere to the general discipline and decorum that is expected of panel members of such discussions. Yeah, to start off with, yes, we have this laden phrase of identity politics, which many of our papers in today's panel try to address. And it has come to signify a wide range of political activity and theorizing based on shared experiences, maybe founded on different social groups, like your papers have tried to address as we went through the different presentations which have been already uploaded. And then organizing all of these belief system, or maybe let's say even programmatic manifestos, as one may say, or in certain cases even to the extent of party affiliation, identity political formation has led to further discourses which some scholars have tried to bifurcate on the line of politics of ideas or politics of presence. So I do believe that the papers in this panel will help us deliberate further on these lines. And first, we will go with all the 5 minutes summarization with all the presenters, and thereafter I will put across the question on each of the presenters. So to start with, Boniface, maybe you can summarize what your paper consists of. Yeah.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
All right, thank you very much for this opportunity to present this paper. Um, the title of my paper is Sardar Patel's Ram Rajya, Refashioning the Indian State. The central idea of my paper revolves around the concept of Ram Rajya and how Sardar Patel conceptualized Ram Rajya as a model of governance for a modern Indian state. The concept of Ram Rajya is derived from the Indian epic Ramayana. This concept has been formulated and reformulated over the centuries by people to suit their desire and ideals. The reason why the concept of Ram Rajya has been subjected to many interpretations is because it does not have a uniform doctrine. Generally, it's considered as an ideal rule or a utopia. Thomas More in the 16th century developed a political philosophy called utopia. This utopia had a proper world order in which the prince and the magistrate governed a certain territory and population. It had proper professionals institution to train people, and it also had institution to punish people for their crimes. Ram Raja lacked such an order of things found in Thomas More's utopia. This is the reason why we have so many interpretations of Ram Raja. For instance, the secular version of Ram Raja given by Mahatma Gandhi, and on the contrary, we have the Hindu Raj version of Ram Raja given by Hindu fundamentalists. My paper draws its theoretical framework from Bhattacharya's book The Nation and its Fragments. Here, Chatterjee argues that nationalism operates on two levels, one in the material domain and the other in the spiritual domain. In the material domain, the nationalist imitates the Western method of governance, the state, and the economy. In the spiritual domain, the nationalist develops a modern national culture that would be suitable for a modern state. This project of culture modernity includes developing national and regional languages, a new education system, resolving caste divide, and rewriting of national history. Using this framework of national building, I argue that Patel's concept of Ram Rajya works on the spiritual cultural domain. Patel mandates that Ram Rajya can be achieved through the establishment of a national education in which Hindi and regional language should be the medium of instruction. Ram Rajya can be achieved if there is an abolition of caste, and this can be done through legislation and spiritual self-disciplining, by which uh, in which there should be no observation of caste distinctions and practices. Ram Rajya also requires a rewriting of Indian history, in which India is the land of many religions, and in which Muslim who are normally considered as invaders of Hindu society are accommodated too. The system of governance in Ram Raja is also drawn from the Indian traditional practice of village self-governance, which is the panchayat system. The panchayat Raj system was considered to be the best system of governance for a decentralized nation state that the Ram Rajya envisioned. The central argument of my paper is that Patil's Ram Rajya is a spiritual reworking of Indian culture and history. It is different from other versions of Ram Rajya formulated by national organizations such as the BJP and the Ram Rajya Parishad, in which the Muslim and the lower caste are systematically marginalized. To conclude, I would like to say that Patil Ram Raja also suffers from some kind of idealism because the institution of Panchayat Raj is not free from caste. But then Patel knew that Ram Raja as an ideal form of government cannot be achieved immediately. Rather, it is a goal that the nation should work towards achieving in the future. That's the end of my brief presentation, or rather, a summary of my paper.
Very well timed, Boni, because you still have 20 seconds. I was going to give you a warning, but then, yeah, you have timed it well. And thank you for that interesting paper, which will definitely raise a whole lot of questions. Yeah, and
Thank you very
moving
much.
on. Yeah, moving on next, may I ask Garima to give us a brief about her paper? Yeah.
Actually, my paper was focused on. Am I audible? Am I
Yeah,
audible?
yes, you're audible. You're audible. Huh?
In my paper, I have focused on the issue of identity politics, and I have taken Indian Americans as a case study for studying the issue of identity politics in America, in United States. So, a central idea behind my paper is the inner divide between between the concept of equal America, establishment of an equal America, equal for all, as dreamt by Martin Luther King, and then the issue of identity politics and group politics that on the same time creates internal divisions within the society. Okay, but we see by the by the end of 20th century, this issue of identity politics and group politics started emerging with the rise of many movements like black movements, because they often felt marginalized, and there are many groups in America within the American society, like there are Latinos, okay, there are Filipinos, there are Indians, or South Asians, Muslims. So they all have their own grievances, and the main idea behind is that they all want to be assimilated in the American society and be treated equally like the whites. So whiteness and Americanness went hand in hand. Okay, so they all had this internal desire to be counted as whites or superiors. Now, Indian Americans, when I studied the case of Indian Americans, I see that they have traveled a long way, because from being treated as merely as a marginal society, marginal group, they have today been, as we can see in American elections, recent US elections, how they have played a very important role as a especially in the swing states. Their votes mattered a lot, and we also know that the vice president who has been elected, she's also half Indian. So how they have traveled this long way, and how identity politics, the issue of identity politics, continues to divide America, at the same time continues to influence America. So there are two viewpoints on this. I've also analyzed the different philosophical ideas behind this. So on one side, I see there is Fukuyama, okay, who and other such philosophers who are against the issue of identity politics, and they see that basically identity has been used for promoting their own political ends by some groups. The issue of identity has been used by some class for basically promoting their own political ends. But on the other hand, there are other people who think that the different groups in the society, they should be given equal opportunities, and for that, identity politics is a very good thing, so that they all get equal opportunity. So there are two viewpoints on this, and by studying the issue of identity politics, what my conclusion is that identity politics, Indian Americans, they have traveled a long way, and now I see that they have not only assimilated in the American society, made themselves and created space for them in the politics, in the business, and every important positions in American society. And they have followed this hybrid culture. Okay, they have followed their own culture also, and they have assimilated some of the American cultures also. So yes, there are divisions within the Indian community also. If I see, recently there has been many divisions. There has been divisions between Hindus, Muslims, and other communities. Then there is division on the basis of language. Okay, so we see there is samosa caucus, there is dosa caucus, there is South Indians, North Indians. So there are internal divisions within the Indian community also. But on the broadly, they are called Indians. But so there are two things. On one thing, we can say that Indians have traveled a lot, and they have Indian Americans have made themselves for themselves in American society. And on the other hand, there are internal divisions within their own community also. So it's my paper is basically exploratory in nature. So I have not started from any hypothesis. So I'm just trying to explore the issue of identity politics from the prism of Indian Americans. That's it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Garima. And yeah, again, another well-timed presentation. You also had 20 seconds, so it's good to see that our presenters are well prepared. We will continue with the discussion after we finish with all our presenters. So may I ask Sunita to give us a summarized version of her research?
Yes. First of all, good morning, Honorable Chairperson of today's International Virtual Conference on Identity, Myths, Memories, Communication, and Cultural Narratives. And dear panelists, rest of the panelists, very good morning to all of you. This is Sunita Das, PhD scholar from Political Science Department, Assam University, Silchar, and my research paper is titled as Violence Against Dalit Women. So, violence against women is not a subject of deep concern up until 1960s. However, along with the coming of second wave feminism in the 1970s, the issue receives an increasing importance. The feminist contribution coins gender differences as the causes for violence against women. The feminist patriarchal theory criticizes it and pointed out that the role of perpetrators is equally important for violence against women. However, the feminist patriarchal theory was criticized during the 1980s on the ground that it neglects the violence experienced by the women belonging to different races, marginalized groups, black, different ethnic groups, and assumes the experiences of white women as universally applicable. So, in India also, the same thing is true. If we see Indian feminism also, so all the experiences of middle class women are considered as universalized, and the rest of the suffering subjugations of the rest of the women are not is not coming in the limelight. So in this context, I have chosen the topic Dalit women, violence against Dalit women. So India is a country known for its spirituality, religion, diverse culture, the age-old ethnicity, identity, etc. The rich history of civilization in India shows that there are always some code of conducts to govern the day-to-day life of each and every citizen in India. These rules and regulations which govern the life of Hindu society can be found in the famous law book written by Sage Manu, which excluded women and Shudras from getting liberty, equality, justice, social, economic, and political, etc. The Shudras are divided into two categories again. There is excluded Shudras and not excluded Shudras. These not excluded Shudras are called Ati Shudras, and they are also known as Dalits. So there are great attempts in the 18th and 19th century for their overall upliftment, since they are completely marginalized from all grounds, socio-economic, political, and so on. And women belonging to this group face double oppression on the basis of caste and gender. And they are marginalized among the marginalized groups. All types of violence, that is either physical or mental, get a tremendous expression when it comes to Dalit women. They face violence in the workplace, at home, and are completely subjugated and tortured. So this is the overview of my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sunita. That was again a well summarized presentation. May I ask Ruth to give us a brief overview of her research work?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Manipur. A very warm good morning to everyone. Today, I'll just compactly discuss on the core ideas of my paper in a nutshell. In my paper, which is titled as Oral History, Identity, Communication, and Governance, the central argument of my paper is that oral history is intrinsic to the identity of the people. Oral history is the bridge that connects the past to the present. And in terms of governance, the pattern of governance and administration that prevails in the past continues to be the mode of governance even to the present situation. Here, I specifically refer to customary law when I talk in terms of governance. Another argument is that technology plays a very important role towards documentation and preservation of oral history. My study is based on my research work, which is conducted among the Mar of Manipur. The Mars are one of the tribes of India, and their highest concentration is in Manipur, which lies in the northeastern part of India. Mars are one of the most literate tribes, and then they are also one of the first tribes to experience the influence of Christianity in Manipur. The findings, or let's say this, my study shows that the element of Mar culture, okay, to name a few in terms of clan system, the tradition of rice beer, process of negotiation through reconciliation, which are oral in nature. They hold a very important place in Mar identity. Mars have also no doubt experienced the influence of Christianity, which resulted in bringing about a number of changes, say in terms of their religious beliefs. Okay, I would not go into that detail. Or specifically, I want to focus in terms of their culture. As I said earlier, rice beer plays a very important role. It has a very important significance. But with the coming of Christianity and with the teaching of Christianity, slowly by slowly, people started giving up this tradition of drinking rice beer, and after the conversion to Christianity, the whole issue of tea tradition started. Here, I wanted to mention here that acceptance of Christianity, no doubt the people, it has changed their culture. However, the elements and the significance and meaning attached to it remains. Today, people no longer drink rice beer, but the same meaning, the same importance that they have attached to rice beer, they now attach it to the tradition of tea culture. More historians and scholars, they have started documenting the oral history in the vernacular and in English. Here one can see the important role played by technology towards documentation, preservation of the rich oral history. Another very important constituent of Mar history is the customary law. And the important features of Mar customary law are that it is oral in nature, it is flexibility, it is accessible, and it aims at amicable settlement. It is also worthwhile to mention that today, despite the presence of the state legal system, customary law is the preferred form of governance, or it is the preferred form to solve any kinds of dispute by the Mar people. And also cases that have reached the state court, it's just countable, and those cases are mostly because of some kind of official requirement and so on. So this clearly shows how the Mar upholds their customs, their traditions, their roots in the present time. And given the fact that customary law, it plays a very important role in terms of the governance, in terms of the documentation, in terms of the governance of the people, documentation of the customary law was felt needed by the Mar. So the process is going. So documentation of the Mar customary law was met. But today, with the changing time, in order to make the customary law applicable to the present situation, the whole process of review of customary law is going on. So even the Mar are also awaiting for the review of the review process to get over and to come up with a new customary law. Here, when I say review, doesn't mean to change the whole lot of customary law, but rather it means to make the law applicable to the present time, so it doesn't fade away. Okay, so I just want to conclude that oral history plays a very important role in identity formation. It connects the past to the present, and documentation and preservation of the rich oral history is very important. Yeah, that's the gist of my paper. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Well timed again, and very interesting study that you have come up with. Can we hear from Evangeline now?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right. Now, the paper that I have submitted is on revisiting the question of Khasi origin and identity through the creation myth. Now, creation myth, I have spoke at length about the importance of creation myth. They exist and they form a very integral part of every culture. Now, and their existence and influence not merely transcend the art of telling the narrative, but also form the dogmatic backbone of a primitive society. Now, creation myth among the Khasis not only link the people to their ancestors, but also in a way helps them to identify with their origin and thus claim an identity. Now, the Khasipna community, who in their Khanatang, or what is called the sanctified stories, they called themselves the children of the Hinyotrepnioskum, or the 7 huts and the 7 families. Now, my paper also talks about the fact that it is natural that myth makers the world over, not only the Khasis, attempt to tell the story of the birth and the creation of the world. Usually, they reach out to the process of mammalian birth for imagery and metaphor. So the female plays a very primary role in these myths. Now, apart from that, according to the Khasi creation myth, God summoned what is called the divine Darbar, whereby he declared that the 7 clans, the 7 huts, should adhere to the 3 principles or the tenets of Katibri Tiblay, which means to know God and to know man and know God. Katibri Tiblay, knowledge of one's maternal and paternal relations, and Kamai Kahok, which means earning righteousness and having work ethic. Now, apart from that, the myth of I have also stressed on the myth of the Sopet Beneng, which means the navel of heaven. It explains the genesis of the Khasi race, which serves as an axis mundi, or the symbol of the world center. Now, in this story, it is not in man to be content, okay, and he starts to question the dictates of God, and he wanted to branch out. He does strayed from the three tenets, and God, greatly vexed by man's rebelliousness, decided to break off ties with man and close forever the golden ladder, or the Jinkiang Xiar. Now, thus the golden age of the Khasi says ended, and cut off from God, Khasi finds himself in a state of exile. The whispers of the divine decree now serve as a reminder to the children of the Hinyotrep Hunyoskom of a situation which is fraught with uncertainty, where the imperative must be by all means a construction of an identity based on the semblance of the former one. Now, Edward sets plurality of vision in his book Reflections on Exile. uh, the Khasi story finds meaning in the worldview of the finds meaning in the worldview of the Khasi exile, whose existence is now being determined by the fluidness of all things, and he makes Earth his home, and he must seek to construct an earth-bound identity. Now, one of the widespread motifs in creation myth is the separation of heaven and earth, or the fall from grace. Now, the motif is related to the birth metaphor in creation, in that the separation is necessitated by the otherwise never-ending coital connection, especially in the case of Jinking Xiar. Apart from that, I've also mentioned a little bit about the archaeological evidence discovered by Marco Mitri in this Lom Sopet Bening, whereby he found monuments, burial kist, cremation mounds, iron smelting, and stone implements of Neolithic origin at Sopet Bening, which suggests that the entire folk story actually is a compressed narration of the transformation undergoing in society at that time. The data suggests that there is a distinct cultural identity that was taking shape, and some sort of social formation process was definitely at work. So the Lom Sopet Bening continues to survive in people's memory as a cradle of their culture, as well as the ancestral home of the people. So that is a summary of my entire paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Evangeline. That's another interesting study that has been brought to the panel. Thank you for bringing it across.
Thank you.
We'll come back with the questions again after some time. Priyanka, can we hear from you now? Are you there, Priyanka?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you could switch on your video, that would be...
I have,
Yeah, now you're visible here. Fine.
okay. Good morning, respected teachers, my fellow presenters, and the listeners. The topic of my presentation is Muhajirs and Refugees, Post-Partition Nostalgia and Identity Crisis in Joginder Paul's writings. The most determining feature of Partition of India 1947 has been its effect on common people and their surrounding, because the sudden creation of the border suddenly also changed the sovereignty over one's place. Therefore, just as it is important to understand the history of partition, its political depth and after effects, it is also important to understand in thematic detail as to how certain spaces attained reconfigured meanings in post-partition times, and how they further influenced the community and identity space of a displaced individual, of a migrant, of a refugee. With this frame of reference, the paper looks into the concepts of space, place, memory, nostalgia, and identity crisis, with special focus on refugees who are constantly engaged in this act of remembering their past. The research objectives of my paper are: one, how a real place becomes a nostalgic memory in the mind of a displaced person that they keep revisiting. Second, to analyze the way in which this nostalgia is perceived by the younger generation as compared to the older lot. Third, to understand the identity crisis that then erupts among the refugees because of the clash of their present reality and the nostalgic past where they keep dwelling in their mind. Third, how refugees contest the bordered understanding of nation states by remembering, revisiting, and reconstructing their past homelands. The present study intends to critically analyze the fiction of shorter types, that is, two short stories authored by Joginder Paul titled Thirst of Rivers and Dove, and also a novella titled, written by Joginder Paul titled Sleepwalkers or Khwabru. The paper is further divided into various themes. The first is the introduction, where I introduce my topic and also the conceptual and theoretical framework that I used in my paper. Second, my paper deals with post-partition nostalgia, where I discuss how the protagonist and how the characters in the story go through this post-partition nostalgia about their home and homeland. Within this, I also discuss how this effect, or how the pain of getting away from the home and homeland is not so much understood or felt by the second generation, and the difference that is there in their idea of trauma, whereas the difference and how the elder generation takes and accepts this trauma. Third is basically the identity crisis, how these refugees continue to become a muhajirs and the second class citizen in a country that was supposedly formed for themselves. They were never title of being the true countrymen. So they did not have the idea of belongingness also. Fourth, the idea of border contestations in partition literature, how the narratives through the dialogues of the characters and the time-space shift question the hegemonic reality of two-nation theory. And fifth, I have concluded and I have summarized all the ideas that I have used in my paper. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Priyanka. And those are definitely some interesting themes that you have brought about and the objectives that you have identified. And I would also urge the other panelists to even cross-question each other, because there are so many interesting themes which somewhere are interrelated to all of the papers that you have brought together on this table. Yeah. So in continuation, may I now ask One Plea to please present his paper?
Respected chairperson, presenters, and attendees. My paper is entitled Thoshun, the act of rubbing lime among the Khasis of Meghalaya. Lime or shun is an important part of Khasi folk culture and tradition. It is a predominant element in the community's rites and rituals, starting from birth rites till death rites. Lime is a part of the people's life, and as an ingredient forms the crux of the local chewing habit of the Khasis known as kwai, a combination of areca nut, betel leaf, and lime, which is part of the social construct of the Khasi society. The idea for the paper came about because as a person being from Shillong and Meghalaya, marks of marks of lime are seen in every nook and corner of Meghalaya, which inhibits prohibition against the rubbing of lime in public places. And these are seen on signboards and is read as "Don't rub lime" or "Wat tak shun." To an onlooker, these line marks may seem as a nuisance or maybe even seen as a form of vandalism. Thus may be this prohibition. And to understand this paper, I have looked into two concepts. One is Umberto Eco's semiotic line, and the other is Roland Barthes' essay, The Author's Death. Why these two concepts have been brought about is because that one, a sign is something which is interpreted differently by different people, and without knowing the genesis or the origins of the concept, one inculcates a different meaning of the sign, thus inhibiting the an example of what Roland Barthes said in his essay, The Author's Death. So, thus, to understand the phenomenon, this paper examines the importance of lime or kashun among the Khasis of Meghalaya and the relation of lime with ritual, auspiciousness, superstition, ethnomedicine, and folklore of the community. The ritual of loving lime among the Khasis is present since time immemorial. Thus, Thoshun is a ritual. I say and I call it as a ritual as it is a socio-cultural activity which the people of Meghalaya partake, whether one performs it willingly, consciously, or subconsciously. Thaw, which translate to write, and ta to apply. In this context, the word thaw shun is used because the marks are a subconscious art form which can be read as a sign or a text which inhibits a standalone meaning for the interpreter. So through this study, I have found 6 results. One is the connection of lime with auspiciousness. Uh, every year in the month of February, there is a pilgrimage to the Lom Sorbet Penang. And this pilgrimage begins with the rubbing of lime on a boulder which is situated at the foothill of the Sorbet Penang. These lime marks mark an auspicious beginning, and it is believed that it wards away the evil spirits and strengthens one's renewal or one's soul. And maybe this is why there is a predominant lime marks in and around the city. The second is lime and dust and the prohibition of altering the word. Lime is associated with dust because lime is white and lime is mythical. Lime also, as a word shun, it also means white and it also means enmity. So there is a prohibition which has been stuck that don't use the word shun when it's dark, so that there'll be no enmity within the two people. And another anecdote which I received from a colleague of mine, Glory Kamar, it said that lime after sunset, because there are people in the Khasi, it is believed that there are some clans who hold the poison deity or kabi. So that the bee doesn't follow you after the at night. Thus lime should not be called balay, or instead it should be called as kabale and not shun after sunset. Another result which has been found was from Epis Ames' book Kaskut
Okay.
Upakha,
Yes.
Ulay Open, which is situated in Nongston.
One
So
thing,
people
you'll
who
have to wind up.
it's a protector, the lime as a healing potent. Lime is also part of folklore. And in all, it can be understood that the ritual of loving lime, Kathoshun, is a symbol which unifies the psyche of belief among the Khasi, thus the habit of rubbing lime. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, One Way. I think you'll have to put the speaker somewhere, like, because there's an echo coming.
Sure.
Yeah. So maybe we'll start with your question on your paper. Could you further elaborate? It's been an interesting study, like to see the concept of lime, as we all have known, and as you have presented in your paper, as a bridge and a connector between various subgroups of Khasi community. And that way, the idea of Thosun as an social cultural activity associated with identity formation. So, in this context, could you further elaborate how have you contextualized Roland Barthes' concept of death of the author with further examples?
So when it comes to Roland Barthes and the death of the author, what this the concept of Thoshun has been a floating signifier, and as it has been stuck in oral tradition and oral knowledge and oral literature, thus little has been known about it, and thus it has been liquefied through time and through generation. So the origin sense of 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 the act is not known, and people have come up with their own understanding of it. Like a person, one respondent said that lime was not called June after sunset because in the olden days there was no light in the shop. So to point out to the object, it was said that please pass me the white thing or the ballet. But in this context, when we understand, when we re-examine the situation, it was understood that the market or the yohat was always placed during the day when there is light, because back then it would be understood that there would be no electrification in the market area. So this as an example.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that comes out pretty clear, and it is interesting to see because this concept of death of the author has been applied in various texts and in different contexts, even in digital contexts as well. And it is interesting to see how you have applied it in your study. Yeah, thank you, Wanpli. Priyanka, I would like to yeah make a note that it's quite interesting. Like we have mentioned, your paper deals with the concept of space, place, and identity, around the concept of home and homeland, and how it is redefined through various nostalgia and memories associated with this. So, can you build up on the theorizing of this particular concept? As to how is the connection between material memory and identity, or even identity crisis, as you have pointed out, and also mentioned a little bit maybe on the impact of partition on this entire identity formation.
Okay. So, ma'am, first I will begin with the smaller one, that the impact of partition on identity crisis. So, the whole idea of partition was to create two separate nation states, and majorly on the basis of religion. People who used to live across the border at that time suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of the border, and they thought that the country that exists across the border is the country that is formed for them, and that is why that is their nation, that is where they belong to, religiously also, and that is why it becomes important that they cross the border and they go to their own community and everything. But when they crossed the border, they realized that even though this country was supposedly to be formed for us, they are not accepting us. We still remain the refugees, the outsiders, the one who have influxed inside the whole country. And they did not, the nationalist identity that they were trying to get, they were not able to get it. They were still as Joginder Paul also explains in his stories, that they were still seen as muhajirs or sharnathis, who have come from outside and who are just taking a place, taking a space inside. In fact, where these people were supposed to stay, those places were also at the outskirts. They were not proper colonies or proper houses. They were in the outskirts. They were camps, the refugee camps. So they never got that nationalist identity for which they actually crossed the border. And also because they were not able to leave their past, they were not able to leave their past identity, past homeland, past home, because that is where their ancestors have lived, that is where they have lived since their birth. So this created a kind of identity confusion within themselves. They were Pakistanis, they were Hindustanis, they were Sharnathis, they were Mohajirs at the same time, and they were also nothing. So there were a whole lot of confusion. Even today, when we look at partition archives and we look at oral history and we look at how people are coming up and how they are, trying to find, after all these years, they find their relations, they find their family across the border. And but half family is this side of the border and half family is that side of the border. So the problem as to how they identify themselves, either as Pakistanis or Hindustanis or Indians, becomes complicated. And that is how partition impacted, or partition brought with it, migration and identity crisis. Second, coming to the idea of material objects or material memory, identity crisis, I would say that is further it gets further complicated with the idea of material memories or material objects, because material objects, as scholars define it, are those objects that refugees or migrants deliberately keep with themselves because they have a memory attached to it, they have an identity attached to it. For example, in Paul's first story, Thirst of Rivers, Bebe, who has crossed the border, who has left her ancestral home in Pakistan, her home is burnt in riots and everything, yet she carries the keys of her ancestral homes with her, and these keys become the memory objects, and these keys also become an object with which she relates, with which she can find her identity, and thus also an obstacle that she's not able to form her new identity in this new place, that she's stuck with her past identity. So that is how material objects, material memory is also related to identity crisis, and how it stands as an obstacle in forming a new identity, in accepting the new reality.
Thank you, Priyanka. That was quite clear, and for using those, exemplifying those, context and nuances which further build up even to that level of identity construction. Yeah. Thank you for that, Priyanka. Yeah. And Evangeline, in your study, you have mentioned that, the 19th century conception of myth is something around, something opposed to reality, something which amounts to rejection as absurd and fanciful. So in this particular context, how does your study and the association of myth come to the sustenance of contemporary social order?
Okay. Now, during my study, actually, when I read on especially creation myth, okay, now the 19, as you said, the 19 concept of myth is something which is fancy, something which is very fanciful, something which is quite absurd. But when you go deep, especially when we talk about this particular myth that I'm talking about, which deals with the Lumsopet Bineng. Now, before the archaeological evidence of Mako Mitri, it was just plainly seen as a myth, something which is not, which does not have any evidence. But after his discovery, actually a lot has changed. He for I think for 40 years he undertook the archaeological excavation of that particular place, and two sites came to mind, that is Lao Nong Tro as well as Lo Mauba. Now, in these two sites, there are a lot of findings, as I've read out before. Some Neolithic, implements were also found. Now, this particularly indicate that there was some sort of the beginning of sedentary lifestyle at that point in time, and also there was some sort of some sort of transformation that was going on. You have the development of agriculture. Now, apart from that, you also have some sort of development and transformation. Now, the Neolithic period, as has been highlighted, is with its coherent entity determined by a single historical and evolutionary process, served as the datum point, which can be appropriated with the fossil of the Sopet. The archaeological findings seem to suggest that the entire folk, as I said before, the entire folk story is a compressed narration of the transformation that was going on, be it transformation going on in the society or transformation going on in terms of sedentary lifestyle and agriculture. The folk narrative can be looked at as an embedded account of the accomplishment achieved by the earliest settlers who were able to tame the hills in the Lomsopet Next. So therefore, it serves as the cradle. It serves as the cradle of identity, the cradle of civilization of the Khasi and the Jaintia people.
Thank you, Evangeline. That was a good response. Moving on to you, Ruth. Yeah, you have mentioned that you have cited Mahuka 2019 in terms of indigenous people having their respective ways of thinking about, practicing, and defining history, right? And in this context, we talk about customary law, text, norms. So what would you think is the impact of these customary practices that we're talking about in terms of social and identity construction? Is it restrictive? Is it progressive? As you can see, not just in the context of maybe your specific study, like the Ma community, but in general.
Yeah.
The customary practices, yeah.
Yeah. Customary practice, as we know, it's not just applicable only to the MAR. It is you can see it everywhere. It's been practiced in context also. Again, this has been a part of my research work also. So when we talk in terms of customary law, okay, I mean, as I have also discussed in my paper, the features of customary law in such that it is accessible, okay, it is accessible, and in the sense that it is also, it aims to bring about amicable settlement. Okay, so these are important features of the reasons why people prefer to solve the cases. Plus, these laws are not laws which are already outdated. These laws are laws which are even applicable to the present scenario also. So as I've also mentioned, like this, despite the presence of the state law, why people still prefer to solve the cases through customary law, it is because these laws are also very much applicable to the present scenario, and it is where people go back to their roots. Okay, people doesn't want to give up this customary law. They doesn't just wanted to get over with despite the state legal system or despite the presence of other legal system. So it is customer law becomes a very important context, a very important features of the identity formation of the people, because this is where it is connected with their past, and then which is also still very much applicable to the present scenario. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ruth, for applying that broader contextualization of your study and elaborating it further. Yeah. And Sunita, would you like to tell us about the sociological model that you have been mentioning in relation to violence against women, Dalit women in particular, as per your study, that you have basically touched upon in your paper, the sociological model?
Sociological model. Actually, madam, sociological model from your question, what I understood is that how the social factors in this much. Am I correct, madam?
Yeah,
Means
over time,
sociological.
like do you
Actually,
see any pattern or do you see any particular model that is emerging based on the several studies on that line that you have conducted?
that is still now. Uh, I'm also means in a nascent stage of research. I cannot say much about it. So what I can say is that this is violence against Dalit women, and it's a Dalit with the along with the coming of Dalit feminism, when that is when the issues for Dalits and Dalit women came into prominence. That is in the 1990s probably. From that onwards, they started against separate that is. Assertion of their rights, and with this, that is in the world of academy also, it got prominence. So Dalit feminist, from a Dalit feminist perspective, or Dalit feminist scholar sees the violence against the women is a uh, is an outcome of their socio-economic and political status on the basis of caste, class, and gender. So this much I can say right now, madam.
Yeah, but thank you for attempting that. And maybe in the long run, as you continue with this study, definitely you'll be able to find major narratives and major themes that must have been emerging over time and add more to this area of study as you're doing right now. Yeah. Thank you, Sunita.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll move on to Garima. Garima, you have made quite a contemporary analysis. Before Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's group got elected, you already had our abstract and paper submitted. So that was quite up to date and contemporary in relation to identity conflicts and identity politics and contextualization in the case of Indian Americans. In this context, would you like to elaborate a bit more further on the line of, in what ways the American politics is shaped by ethnicity, multiculturalism, and identity construction? And adding on to that, we have had Anne Phillips, who had argued that, the politics of ideas has given way to politics of presence. So what are your opinions on this?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, yes, I've taken a very contemporary topic, ma'am, because it was really interesting for me to study identity politics in the as the U.S. elections were happening, and this issue is a very big issue. Especially, we see there are movements like Black Lives Matter, and there are many women movements. So amid these issues, U.S. elections happened, and then they are talking about the influence of Indian Americans. We can see all the new channels, they are talking about how Indian Americans are influencing the elections. I just was explaining the dosa caucus and the samosa caucus, how these are having very important impact, especially in the swing states, especially when there is we see in the election, when the elections results were coming and there was confusion that who will win, and there was recounting and all. So in all those states, Indian Americans had a very important influence. So America, we see, ma'am, the influence of identity politics has been very, like in India, caste is very important, religion is important. In America, if we see the politics, the identity is to play a very important role. America is basically a land of migrants, okay, mostly Europeans, then some Asians and and Chinese, then we see Italians, so Filipinos, and so all these other different groups are there. They all have assimilated in the American culture, in the American society, and I was just talking about how they all have this quest to be treated as whites, as white Americans, because there was the dominance of male, white Protestant males. Okay, in the American politics earlier. Now women have come, and they are also making a mark on it, but that quest was there. So all the different groups, they have this desire to be treated as that. But now what is happening is that we see blacks are also coming, Indians are also making a lot of influence. So in America, we can see that identity politics, especially, we can see has a very important role to play. And of course, there are people who say that it is divisive, it divides societies, but it is America, it is going to stay, because there are different groups, and they all some they feel marginalized. They feel marginalized. So this issue of politics and identity will come there. So that was all, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. And Boniface, we have just 4 minutes left, so we will just try to wind up with the last question towards you. You have brought about the importance of the concept of nationalism and nationalistic refashioning, as mentioned in your paper. Could you just emphasize again on and elaborate a little bit on the importance of source text, the source text in any context in weaving cultural narratives? Could you hear me, Boniface? I think there's some
Hello.
connectivity. Yeah, we can hear you. Could you get the question?
Not really. I didn't hear it wrong.
Yeah. So could you just elaborate a little bit or explain a little bit on the importance of the source text, the reference point, the source text in the context of weaving cultural narratives?
Okay. Right now, the source material which I've used are letters and speeches which Sarah Patel has written during 1947 to 1950. So, if you read at those material, there we see a pattern of nation building where they try to create new culture, give, maybe they even try to rewrite new ways of writing history, new content. So in that way, they're able to rewrite history, which in a way is in opposition to what the colonial history has always been about. So that's all that I can say right now.
Yeah, thank you, Boniface. In fact, this leads us to what our keynote speaker yesterday, Professor Bhagagupta, had mentioned in relation to mobile gaze, which makes us, all of our papers today that has been brought on the panel today, at the concept of, cultivation of different epistemologies, the source text that Boniface had briefly touched upon, and the understanding in terms of what are the strong pointers and metaphors that mutually reinforce each other. And that is where, the second wave of sudden perspectives, or the swaps model, becomes extremely relevant in reconsidering what we have received as knowledge so long and so far, and where we need to relook at, understanding things which have been naturalized from an unnaturalized position. So that is where, we have all of these concepts of what is the space that is theorizing of identity construction taking into conception, what conceptualizes it, and what agendas are behind the making of these spaces, what dynamics are at play, and what is the problem. Because in research, that if you do not have a problem, there is a problem, or there is a problem if you do not have a problem, right? So we need to understand the problematic, what is the problematic in conceptualizing of all of these knowledge domains. So I would like to thank all of you, considering that our time is almost up. We just have 1 minute left, and thank you for all of your interesting papers. We need to, in fact, have more time to actually dwell into those concepts that you all have touched upon. But thank you so much for taking time to be actually coming live, which is actually sometimes quite difficult considering different data connectivity. But thank you for the effort that you have put in, and thank you for all your interesting concepts. So we'll wind up the session here. Rupa, are you here by any chance?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
ma'am, I'm
fine.
here.
Yeah, over to you, Rupa. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Machungomliu Kamai, for your sharing the sessions. And I believe we had a very fruitful discussions through these panel presentations, understanding the different intricacy in the paper presentations by the participants, and from learning from the refreshing the Indian state to the act of rubbing lime among the Khasis of Meghalaya. I thank all the participants and thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
you can
Thank you.
join us again at 12 o'clock in the other Zoom session. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye. Yeah.